ay. Okay. So we're operational there. Let's see. Come on. Give me a break. Okay. So, all right, it looks like that's working. Let's see. What about... Okay, is Rumble back up? Are you guys back up on Rumble? I hate this. I hate it when it does this. Well, it looks like Rumble is working, at least for me. Are you guys there? Can you guys see me? Give me a... Okay, there's a thumbs up, so we're good there. All right. I won't worry about any of the others then, I guess. Okay. All right. So, what they do is they break it up and they add some things in between. And this particular section at the end of this is just fantastic. Because it talks about the faith and the founders and, faith and the founders. It's really quite entertaining as far as that is concerned, because of the fact that a lot of people have said multiple times that there's a lot of people that have said multiple times and tried to argue that the fact that that America is not a Christian country, okay, and yet there's some points in here in this book, well-researched book, that indicates otherwise. For an example, point number 1, the founders believe that we are creatures of God and that God endows us with inalienable rights. They've got point number 2 here. The Bible was an indispensable source of inspiration for the founders, under which they talked about being under the 18th century at a time when books were relatively scarce. If an American family owned one volume, it was likely to be the Bible itself. Number 3 is that the founders believed that God created humans to be free. And we also have the American concept of equality is deeply rooted in the Judaic tradition, because in the ancient Hebrew people, the ancient Hebrew people came to believe that each human being is important to God, that each matters equally in his eyes. Then we have another point where the founders regarded religion as a pillar of American democracy. And then it also, they continued and say that the Bill of Rights guarantees the freedom of religion in order to encourage faith, not necessarily to block it. And we have that the founders believed that America plays a special role in God's plan. So, again, how anybody can think that this American country was not built on a Judeo-Christian religion, and Judeo-Christian principles and values, I should say. Not really built on a religion, but just that was built on values, principles and values, is just asinine to even remotely say that or think that. So, anyway, let's see what's happening here. Oh, goodness. We got the new one back? Okay, so we do have it back. All right. Anyway, so it's Mark, it's back. If you want to jump back over to Facebook, I don't know what. Every once in a while, for some reason, this particular thing, it loses connectivity. I don't know why, and that really bugs me because it doesn't seem to do it. It doesn't seem to break anything else. It's just this one program for the streaming, and I don't understand why. But anyway, all right. So let's move on from there. So I've got some good news and some bad news. We'll go ahead and do the bad news first. Here to start things off. We got some bad news. Let me just go ahead and bring this up here. So the bad news is that we're going to see Biden at Trump's inauguration. They, for whatever reason, they've already announced that he's going to be there. So there you go. And that's whatever. I mean, it is what it is. So we are going to see Biden. He's not going to like disappear or slink away. He's going to be there all the way up until January 20th. So there you go. But some good news, though, is that Trump, and this in the Epoch Times, Trump just announced that he is nominating Kash Patel for the FBI director. Now, this is historical and really, really good because of the fact that Kash Patel, of course, is going to work closely with Pam Bondi, who was recently nominated to run the Justice Department. This is going to send the left into even more of like, well, I don't want to call it a sugar coma because it's not really a sugar coma because sugar would be sweet. But yeah. Anyway, it's just, I mean, this is this is just fantastic, to be honest with you. So, yeah. And of course, all of this is pending Senate confirmation hearings, but let's be honest, Kash Patel probably won't have a problem getting across. So this is fantastic, and he is going to go in and I anticipate clean the entire place out for it. But he just announced it just before I came on the program. He wrote on a post in on Truth Social with regarding it. He said, Kash is a brilliant lawyer, investigator, and American first fighter who has spent his career exposing corruption, defending justice, and protecting the American people. So, yeah, he is definitely going to be there. Now, Kash has said in a recent interview that he would go ahead and shut down the Bureau's headquarters in Washington, turn it into a museum, and then relocate the agency outside of the Beltway. He said, quote, I'd shut down the Hoover building on day one and reopen the next day as a museum of the deep state. And I'd take the 7,000 employees that work in that building and send them across America to chase down criminals. So Trump said that Patel played a key role in revealing what he described as the Russian collusion hoax, which we all know it actually was a Russian collusion hoax, and that Kash Patel would advocate for truth, accountability, and the Constitution. Trump continued on by saying, Kash did an incredible job during my first term, where he served as Chief of Staff in the Department of Defense, Deputy Director of National Intelligence, and Senior Director for Counterterrorism at the National Security Council. Kash also tried over 60 jury trials. The FBI will end the growing crime epidemic in America, dismantle the migrant criminal gangs, and stop the evil scourge of human and drug trafficking across the border. Kash will work under our great Attorney General Pam Bondi to bring back fidelity, bravery, and integrity to the FBI. So there you go. So this is fantastic. This is fantastic. Great news, to be honest with you. And like I said, it is likely going to break the left even further because, well, I mean, let's be honest. here. Apparently, New York and a few other states up in the Northeast, according to the Populist Times, there's a liberal senator who has floated a secession plan. She wants to join Canada and leave Trump's America completely behind. Yeah. So, New York State Senator Liz Krueger has suggested a coalition of northeastern states should secede from the United States and join Canada, following the announcement of President-elect Donald Trump's return to the White House. Krueger, who serves as the chairwoman of the New York State Senate Finance Committee, proposed the idea of secession as a response to Trump's second term. Yeah. In an interview with Politico, otherwise known as Bullshitico, Krueger stated it is not unreasonable to think outside of the box, defending her suggestion and emphasizing the need for creative solutions in the political landscape. Yeah, let's go ahead and just gloss over the fact that it's illegal, that it's unconstitutional, that, it's not going to happen. So, there you go. So anyway, her proposal centers around the idea that New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Connecticut should join Canada, forming a new province in the northeast region of that country. In September, Krueger elaborated on her thoughts in an interview with the city and state of New York, where she discussed the possibility of secession. She acknowledged that Canada had previously indicated reluctance to allow such a move. She said, I know that Canada has basically said, yeah, we're not letting you all in if he wins. As individuals, they basically made it clear, she said. Despite these challenges, Krueger continued to promote the idea, suggesting that rather than illegally crossing the border, the four states could become part of Canada's political framework. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. I mean, no different than everybody talking about Texas seceding from the Union during the Biden administration. This one is probably going to go as about as far, which is literally nowhere. Anyway, well, we also have, Kamala Harris in her wonderful thing, themed or whatever. She did a statement and to the donors, the small-time donors, the grassroots donors, and she apparently, I don't have any video of this. I did see it on other shows, but let's just say she apparently appeared a little inebriated. If it was a little inebriated, that would be, a lot of people were saying that she was like 3 bottles in or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, the point is, it seemed like she was a little relaxed when she was talking, and she didn't mean, or she didn't say anything that actually made any sense either. So, again, whatever. But one Democrat megadonor, though, is basically saying that because remember, they've already kind of talked about her coming back in 2028 and trying to run in 2028. I mentioned that on this program a couple of nights ago. Well, this Democrat megadonor, which here again in the Populist Times, this Democrat megadonor is calling Kamala's career over. He's saying that she cannot be trusted with money. Now that's true, because remember, she garnered in 107 days close to $1 billion, it was over $1 billion, and she ended up $20 million in the hole, by which she is still begging for money. She is still begging for that money, to come in to try and pay back some of those vendors and some of the bills and everything else that she's got going. But anyway, this guy at 1.5 billion is the question. So the Democrat megadonor John Morgan has called for the end of Kamala Harris's political career, citing her failure in the 2024 presidential race and the exorbitant campaign spending that accompanied her bid. During an appearance on the Cuomo Show on Monday, Morgan expressed frustration over Harris's inability to run a successful campaign, emphasizing that her substantial spending and poor performance in the race disqualify her from any future roles. Okay? Yeah. So here, let's go ahead and just take a listen.
The name is Morgan, and he has raised a lot of money for Democrats. Happy Thanksgiving, big brother. Thank you very much for coming on this show and helping my audience.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
So, John, I never heard anything like this before. Do you think somebody stole the money?
Well, maybe legally. I mean, look, to me, you remember the movie Mad Max when everybody's just doing whatever they wanted into the world? That's what happened here. All of a sudden, everybody's got the keys to the candy store. Ad buyers, talent, consultants. There's 100 days to do it. And the money started pouring in. Remember this, Chris. It wasn't pouring in for Harris. It was pouring in against Trump. Everybody that was voting and supporting Harris was really voting against Trump. And everybody that was voting for Trump was voting for Trump. So she had all this money coming in. She had all these consultants. And if you don't run the ads, you don't get paid for the buy. They were running ads in Florida, where I live, nonstop. And I'm like, why? I mean, are they running them in Alabama and Idaho too? And I'll tell you why. If you don't run the ads, the buyer doesn't get paid. $900,000 to put her face on the Sphere in Las Vegas. In the Sphere, the ego, the crazy, the commissions. I was at the White House for a dinner Friday night, talking to a lot of people, and I'm telling you, man, there's a lot of whispering. There's a lot of names about who got paid this, who got paid that, and a lot of people got rich on the back of donors trying to stop Trump. And I think this disqualifies her forever. If you can't run a campaign, you can't run America. And that would be the argument just day one. So it was terrible. I think she did a good job in the debate. I think she did as good a job as she could hope for in a short period of time. I told everybody, she should not have been the nominee. She was not going to win, and she didn't win, and she lost badly. So she's got to go figure out her life. She's in Hawaii. Tim Walz was at the dinner. She was in Hawaii. So she's having a call with donors this week. They tell me about her political future. I don't think she has a political future. So that's my thought on her.
Okay, this is a problem, folks. I mean, Democrats are unlike Republicans. Democrats, they live and breathe on the mega donors. Okay, Republicans live and breathe on the grassroots campaigns. And it's just, I'm telling you, Hollywood is broken. Hollywood is no longer relevant in the political sphere because of the choices that were made, that all of those people that were trying to back Kamala Harris. And, now you have this whole concept of how she gained 1.5 billion with a B, billion, the biggest haul that anybody has ever done, ever in history for a political campaign. And here she is $20 million in the hole. She's still begging for money to help pay that stuff back. She's lost the campaign because, again, let's face it, she did not resonate with voters. And why anybody would think that in 2019 2019, where she gained literally zero, dropped out of the race before even the first primary, but gained zero votes in the primaries, why they would think why they would think that running her was highly intelligent. And then not only that, but think about this. She had just over 100 days. They hid her from the press. They hid her as effectively from podcasts, from all kinds of things within the first 2 weeks. You'll remember this, we counted down, I think it was 30 or some odd days, 35 days before she even sat down with, I think it was CNN, with sycophantic CNN or whatever it was. And she couldn't even handle that. She tanked in that interview. And at the time, she even had her faithful puppy dog, Tim Walz, following around with her, hopefully to take some of the pressure off. And it didn't freaking work. I mean, this is just horrible. I mean, just absolutely horrible. But, hey, whatever works. I hope that they decide to run her. I really do. I hope they do, because she's going to lose even worse against J.D. Vance, because as that guy was just telling you, okay, the Democrat donors that backed her, they backed her not because of who she was, not because of the fact that she was the Biden chosen pick. They backed her because she was not Donald Trump. That's why. That had nothing to do with her. It had everything to do with Donald Trump and them not wanting Donald Trump to be in office. Well, Hollywood, of course, gee, I hope not. G says, scuttlebutt is that Hillary is looking to get back in. Anyway, yeah, I mean, the Democrat bench, let's just put it out there. The Democrat bench sucks. They really don't have anybody. They're looking at Gavin Newsom, who's destroyed his own state. It's still, messing it up. They are looking at some other people and so on and so forth. It's just, yeah, it's just horrible. Well, Trump's legal victories now are starting to cause a stir as well, mainly just because of the fact that, and again, keep in mind, we've told you on this program, other political pundits, people in these political observational spheres have been saying the exact same thing. There's no there. There's nothing there. All right. And for the simple fact that Jackass Smith, I should say, who has so many novel legal theories that have never been proven in court, that he tries to do all these wonderful things, supposedly, and always fails. Why they tapped him, I have no idea. But they went ahead and tapped him. And he couldn't gain enough traction or foothold. He was unconstitutionally appointed. Thankfully, Clarence Thomas pointed that out, because I don't think that would have even been a remote thought had it not been for Clarence Thomas pointing that out. The entire case against him, both in Florida, fell apart because of that unconstitutional appointment. In New York, the only not Washington, D.C., but because Washington, D.C. had a sycophantic judge, they kept that case going. Well, then, even that fell apart, too. That was starting to fall apart as well. And so then you had the whole presidential immunity piece. You had all of these other things that were going on. Everything was going Trump's way. Well, that, and especially after Jackass Smith announced everything, that has caused Hollywood elitists to be in an absolute nuclear meltdown over Trump's legal victories. And so many of them went to X or Blue Sky or, whatever their favorite platform is anymore today. And they essentially all jumped on the bandwagon and are just freaking out. Mark Hamill, who is a staunch leftist, said that today on November 25th, 2024 is the day we officially learned that justice in America, in fact, does not matter. No, justice actually does matter, Mark Hamill. Justice was served in your case. Then Wendell Pierce, who is an actor from The Wire, also took to social media, warning of a potential end of the rule of law. He goes, "No one is above the law" is mythology. No, it actually means that the law is now being correctly and equally applied. John Cryer, whom I'll be honest with you, I actually was impressed with his acting in the television show NCIS. I never watched 2.5 Men, but he is a staunch leftist. He pointed that the evidence against Donald Trump is overwhelming and unrefuted. Well, that's a bunch of shit. But anyway, he says, once again, others will face the consequences of his many crimes. They can't even, John, they couldn't even identify the crime that he may or may not have done. I mean, if you're speaking about the one in New York in particular, but Jack Smith, again, was unconstitutionally appointed. He was going after Trump specifically, and this is part of the problem. These people are not going to admit that they were going after Donald Trump for the specific political purpose to keep him out of the White House. That failed. End of story. Okay. Barbara Streisand, of course, jumped in and said, Trump avoided any accountability for January 6th. Well, that's because he had no accountability for January 6th, Babs. And the stolen documents, again, he had presidential right to declassify anything. It's not like Joe Biden, who stole stuff when he was a senator. She continued and said, this is forever a stain on the concept that no one is above the law. Actually, there is one person who is above the law. His name is Joe Biden, and that's because he is going to get off with the pay to influence scheme for them, going on and so on and so forth. So this has just continued. It's been going on and on and on. And now that we have this announcement of Kash Patel, I guarantee you, all of these folks are going to just start with another renewal. This next 4 years, I'm telling you, is just going to be very, very enlightening, to say the least. Well, there is one case, honestly. I mean, Judge Merchan, that case is likely to go away at this point. He's, completely suspended all dates and everything else, so I wouldn't be surprised to hear that one ends up going into obscurity. But there's one case left that we really haven't heard that much about. And the New York Post, honestly, has a piece on this case. Fani Willis, or Fani, however it's pronounced, is the last person still prosecuting Trump. But the case isn't likely to last much longer, according to sources. So here's the thing. This Fani Willis case, of course, she is the last person that is still got her cases. She has not done anything with it. It was, in fact, as I reported to you before, it was the Georgia Supreme Court had a argument or a oral arguments date on the docket, and the oral arguments date has since been dropped with no explanation from the court. Now, that being said, okay, Willis appears adamant that she is going to stay the court. Now, keep in mind, she did just get reelected as the DA. But she could potentially be kicked off the case by a body who are investigating it, or who are investigating her misappropriation of funds through Nathan Wade, as you recall. All right. But it also could be usurped by the state Supreme Court. And according to sources, the state Supreme Court is likely to step in and close it. Now, they had an oral arguments date for, believe it was December, and they wiped that from the docket. So, according to a defense lawyer who knows Fani, they told the Post, Fani doesn't see how she is headed for a brick wall. She's going full tilt with vengeance and emotions. She's so full of herself and hasn't learned her lesson yet. She doesn't realize she is her own demise, and she's the reason everything is falling apart. Now, she's remained defiant, and as I pointed out, she did win re-election. She has remained defiant and ignored a subpoena in September from a special Senate committee looking into the case, refusing to show up for a hearing when she was supposed to testify. Okay. Now, the Georgia Appeals Court, like I said, abruptly canceled oral arguments and is scheduled for next month in the case. That was scheduled for next month in the case. Trump's lawyers are likely to cite the federal end to the election interference charges against him to get the Georgia case thrown out. And a source close to Willis investigations told the Post, I would be shocked if it wasn't dismissed, but Fani has an ego bigger than the entire state, so who knows? Yeah. There's a picture of Nathan Wade, the boyfriend. So, anyway, I mean, again, this is just, this is going to be, this is interesting. Now, what also is interesting in the piece here, and I did not know this, but check this out. There's another high-profile case that Willis is involved in that is a sprawling and costly trial over the Atlanta area rapper by the name of Young Thug and his associates in the group called YSL, or Young Slime Life, is also going astray under her direction and purview. Her decision, apparently, to prosecute Young Thug and YSL under RICO statutes, as if the rapper and his associates were a mafia-level criminal gang, has also backfired. Several sources close to the case have told the New York Post. The original indictment charged 28 people with conspiring to violate Georgia's RICO Act, but only 6 of those 28 defendants were put on trial that began a year ago. Jurors began deliberating this week, are considering whether to convict a person by the name of Shannon Stillwell and Diamante Kendrick, who raps as Yak Gotti, on gang murder, drug, and gun charges. The other 4 defendants, including Young Thug, took plea deals in October, which one source close to the case told the Post were far better deals than they had been offered at the start. Now, Doug Weinstein is the attorney representing Yak Gotti and told the Post, no doubt this case has been a fiasco. There were about 50 mistrial requests alone and repeated instances that bordered on prosecutorial misconduct. Okay. The judge scolded the prosecutors regularly. They were unprepared, disorganized, and while Fani Willis was not the prosecutor in charge, she chose the person who was, and the buck stops with Fani. So, a commentator in a forum online about the case posted that Fani Willis wanted to appear as being tough on crime. She thought a famous rapper high-profile case would bolster her image, so they went after Thug without any real evidence, and that's why the case is a complete cluster. Anyway. So, she is obviously not a good prosecutor. I don't know why the people of Georgia decided to vote her in. I have no idea, but she is she's not only screwing up the Trump case, but she's also screwing up everything else. So, there we go. All right. That being said, the Democrats are looking, as pointed out earlier, for the next big thing, because as I pointed out, I don't think Kamala Harris, me personally, I don't think Kamala Harris has a snowball's chance in hell of ever becoming the nominee. period. No matter what time period she actually runs in or anything else. Well, the Democrats have decided that they are going to potentially go to somebody who is younger, somebody who is more radical, and, believe it or not, somebody who might be classified as being more moronic than Kamala Harris. Yes, folks. This in red state, and I've seen this across several of the social medias. Lost and rudderless Democrats see AOC as a 2028 presidential contender. Oh my gosh. Could these people get any more desperate? A new report has surfaced suggesting Democrats are feeling lost and rudderless following the election, so much so that a list of presidential contenders for 2028 includes AOC's name. If nothing else, the Hill column ranking potential Democrat contenders for 2028 shows that the Resistance Party has little to offer on the bench when it comes to knocking off Republicans. In fact, polls are showing that Kamala Harris is far and away their preferred candidate. Trump shellacked her despite Harris having every conceivable advantage in the media, exposing her as a thoroughly unlikable person. But they think Harris can somehow rally in 4 years? Far behind her in second place is Gavin Newsom, and with another equally absurd possibility, paternity Pete Buttigieg is up there as well. But the Hill also notes that Democrat operatives are unsure where to go to reclaim their future. Yeah. Anyway, so one strategist told the outlet of the Hill, just like in 2016, we're a little lost and rudderless, not quite sure what we want going forward. And nothing, according to the piece, quite says lost and rudderless like AOC. Yeah. Now, keep in mind, there is no confirmation on any of these people, okay? Seriously, but just imagine. I mean, just think about this. You have AOC, who has gone up against people in congressional hearings and has been completely torn apart. For an example, people who know, like, I don't know, Tom Homan, as an example. Do you honestly think that they're going to be able to get into a debate with, say, J.D. Vance and survive? Yeah, I don't think so. It's just not going to happen. So apparently, the Hill's ranking seems to have developed from conversations with the party insiders. And they wrote, when Democrats talk about the future of the party, the 35-year-old New York Congresswoman's name always bubbles to the top. While they don't necessarily suggest who has her name bubble to the top, they do cite one strategist who says that Democrats have long been impressed with the New York Congresswoman's ability to cut through the BS and tell it like it is. Yeah. Right. Now, I call her a moron, and believe me, I mean, there's obviously, she is not entirely clueless, although she's pretty damn close. She's arguably, in my mind, one of the dumbest members of Congress, for sure. But there is one thing that people like about her, and that is the fact is that she is young, she is fiery, and that she, and by people, I mean the morons of the left, she is young, she is fiery, and she is definitely not afraid to look stupid when the situation warrants it. So again, I don't think very many people are really going to be all that interested in her nationally, just like they are not going to be all that interested in Gavin Newsom nationally, just like, as I've pointed out, with even Ron DeSantis. So many people outside of Florida are not that interested in him nationally. And this is one of the biggest problems and biggest challenges that you have with governors of states. Outside of the state, they're generally, I mean, even my state, Governor Inslee tried to run for president. And outside of the state, he was not very well known. So because of that, and you try to gain a national presence when you're a governor and you're attempting to run for the president, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't do a very, it doesn't equate to national exposure to be very well known in your state. And it's difficult to gain that type of notoriety and name recognition across the country unless you are doing something that is a consistent in the press scenario, such as people like, Sarah Huckabee. She would, she is very well known. Everybody pretty much knows her. She's known nationally, granted not recently, but she is known nationally. You have even like Nikki Haley, for an example, was known nationally just by being, the ambassador to the United Nations. So the challenge, of course, is trying to make it so that an individual can have national exposure without looking like a complete idiot and a moron. And that is very difficult to do when you run in a state like California, for an example, speaking directly about Gavin Newsom. He does some of the most stupid policies ever. His state is running a huge deficit, which we know is not conducive to today's political climate because everybody is wanting to get rid of the debt and the deficits. And so, yeah. Anyway, the point being is that her being able to run for president is even questionable in some cases. For an example, there are others that are talking about AOC, whether or not she has the attributes necessary to run for president. For an example, like Coherent Rational Thoughts, a strategist said of the progressive group, meaning the squad that burst onto the political scene, she and the squad started pushing too hard, too fast. DC doesn't work that way, and our party doesn't work that way. We need to get back to the basics. So, yeah. So forget about the rankings. A poll that was taken lists AOC at just 1%, well behind Kamala Harris, and equal to individuals, for an example, like Minnesota Governor Tampon Tim Walz is there. The same thing as the comedian Jon Stewart. So, yeah. I don't think it's going to go. I don't think it's going to happen. But it is kind of funny to think about, to be honest with you, with regards to this. So anyway. Well, Joe Biden, who throughout the course of his administration has been probably one of the top, shall I say, one of the top overturned presidents, at least within modern history, has once again been overturned in his decisions. And this one is very minor, to be honest with you, but it still leans and brings credence to the idea that the Biden administration, frankly, has zero idea of what they are doing. So you'll recall the whole story about the Texas Department of Public Safety and National Guard throwing up razor wire and all of that along the crossing at Eagle Pass, Texas, in order to stem the flow of the tide of illegal aliens crossing the border at that point. And you'll also recall that a injunction request went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court basically did not block the idea that the Border Patrol could go and cut the razor wire. Okay. And that was an injunction that was designed to stop the practice while the trial was going on. But the Supreme Court decided, and this is the U.S. Supreme Court, by the way, the U.S. Supreme Court decided, no, we're not going to place an injunction in. We're going to have to go through the trial. Well, that trial has now resulted in a bit of an answer. Here in Breitbart, court rules that the Biden admin was wrong to cut the Texas razor wire on the border. So the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit ruled this past Wednesday that the state of Texas can continue to build razor wire border barriers. The court also ruled that the Biden administration was wrong to cut the barriers put in place by the Texas National Guard under Governor Greg Abbott's Operation Lone Star. The Federal Court of Appeals just ruled that Texas has the right to build razor wire border wall that we have constructed to deny illegal entry into our state. This was opposed by Governor Abbott on X. He goes, Biden was wrong to cut the razor wire. And he posted the actual Court of Appeals filing. So the judges ruled that the state of Texas is entitled to a preliminary injunction because the state is seeking only to safeguard its property. The judges ruled that Texas was not trying to regulate the Border Patrol, according to Reuters. Circuit Judge Kyle Duncan, who is a Trump appointee, wrote for the 2-1 majority opinion that the public interest supports clear protections for property rights from government intrusion and control. He added that federal immigration law enforcement must not unnecessarily intrude into the rights of countless property owners. So there you go. And if you think that stuff like this is an indication, by the way, of how the courts are going to start looking at things like immigration and some of the stuff that, say, Tom Homan wants to do, and the governors of states like Colorado that are standing up to the idea that ICE is going to, I mean, I told you this. I told you guys this a while ago, that the U.S. Supreme Court has been very clear in all of its decisions with regards to immigration, that immigration does sit directly in the purview of the federal government. But this particular case was, again, dealing with whether or not the state has the right to protect itself and its property, which it does. Now, Judge Don Willett, also a Trump appointee and former Texas Supreme Court Justice, joined with Duncan on the majority opinion. Now, Biden appointee Judge Irma Carrillo Ramirez dissented, claiming that Texas claimed a virtual power of review over the federal efforts to enforce immigration law. Well, that was the problem. They weren't enforcing it. They weren't enforcing federal law. Okay? So in July, Breitbart, Texas, reported that Border Patrol agents cut border razor wires put in place by Texas National Guardsmen under orders from Governor Abbott. Fox News reporter Bill Malugin published a video showing the agents cutting the border barrier. DPS officials told Malugin, not only does the Texas DPS have permission from the landowner to erect the barrier along the edge of their property, but also the state has permission to arrest migrants who cross the barrier for criminal trespass. So, yeah. So there we go. So the ruling of the lawsuit affirms the state's right to protect private property owners from illegal border crossers. Once again, this is a federalism scenario where the states have stepped in the place of the federal government not doing its job. Well, as I mentioned before, the whole Tom Homan thing, people getting arrested, governors in particular getting arrested for blocking in particular. Now, keep in mind, if they don't necessarily have to work with ICE, they just can't stop ICE from doing their job. They don't have to provide ICE any information. That's already been decided and is a matter of case and court precedent. In particular, as I told you, with regards to in this tangential case, talking about universal background checks for firearm purchases that Arizona and Sheriff Mark Lamb had won, going all the way up to the Supreme Court with regards to it. So there is some legal precedent in the idea that states don't have to or can refuse to help out the federal government when it comes to enforcing immigration laws. However, they cannot block ICE from doing their job. Here in the Epoch Times, and my state just found this out. So King County, which is the county that houses Seattle, Washington, among Bellevue, Washington, and a couple other smaller cities, very, very leftist, folks. I mean, it's because of cities like Seattle and Bellevue that Washington is actually a blue state. Okay. But a federal court has just struck down King County's ban on ICE deportation flights, citing federal supremacy and breach of contractual obligations. So this is the appeals court, a federal appeals court. It's ruled that, and now King County, Washington, by the way, has two airports, one being Seattle-Tacoma, SeaTac, the other one being the King County Airport, that is also known as Boeing Field. Or no, not Boeing Field. Sorry. No, it is Boeing Field. Yeah, I think it's Boeing Field. King County International Airport is close by. Well, so King County apparently put an order out that barred U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement from using that Seattle area airport to deport illegal immigrants, read aliens, from the country is unlawful, affirming a lower court's summary judgment and clearing the way for the removals to continue. So Judge Daniel A. Bress of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. Now, this is weird because, again, keep in mind, the Ninth Circuit is one of the most overturned circuit courts in the land. However, in this particular case, they are correct. Judge Bress wrote in a November 29th opinion, so this was just yesterday, that a 2019 executive order issued by King County Executive Dow Constantine, leftist moron, that prohibited ICE deportation flights was unlawful. The ruling identified two primary legal violations: discrimination against federal operations under the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution, and a breach of a World War II era instrument of transfer agreement governing the airport's use. So that's kind of an obscure reference, but anyway, Bress wrote that the executive order's flight ban discriminatorily burdens the United States in the enforcement of federal immigration law, and that this discrimination, plain on the face of the order, contravenes the intergovernmental immunity doctrine. Rooted in the Supremacy Clause, the Intergovernmental Immunity Doctrine protects federal government operations from discriminatory or obstructive actions by state and local governments. Folks, this is what we have to look forward to with Tom Homan. And these leftist morons are going to find out that there are laws on the books that protect things like what the president is looking, or the president-elect, I should say, is looking to do. See, a lot of these leftist morons, they just don't seem to understand. They just don't get it. They don't understand how the legal system is really and truly supposed to work. Now, they try to use lawfare and legal trickery in order to try and stop things from happening. But in this particular case, they were completely wrong. And this is what's going to, I foresee the next 4 years, at least the next 2, but probably the next 4, to be in this kind of a situation where you have people who actually uphold the Constitution, the rule of law, and don't warp it in order to try and manipulate the system. You're going to see a lot of these kinds of cases coming about. So the court also found that through Constantine's directive, King County actually violated its contractual obligations under the Instrument of Transfer Agreement, which granted the federal government the right to use King County International Airport, commonly known as Boeing Field. So the dispute dates back to April 2019, when Constantine issued an executive order that explicitly opposed ICE's deportation operations. The directive instructed airport officials to ensure that future leases and operating agreements with fixed-base operators, the companies that actually provide essential services like fueling and aircraft maintenance, contain provisions prohibiting them from servicing ICE flights. Now, Constantine, again, a moron Democrat, justified the order by citing the county's disagreement with federal immigration policies, stating the flights raised deeply troubling human rights concerns, which are inconsistent with the values of King County, including family separations and deportation of people into unsafe conditions in other countries. The order effectively had halted deportation flights at the airport. Well, the Department of Justice, and again, keep in mind, 2020, we're still here on, we're still in the Trump era. The DOJ filed suit in February of 2020, arguing that the directive unlawfully obstructed federal immigration enforcement and violated the terms of the airport's transfer to King County, based on an Instrument of Transfer Agreement under the Surplus Property Act of 1944. So there you go. They're going to run across this, people. There's going to be more of this kind of stuff that is going to show up. And keep in mind, too, folks, remember what I was saying about that whole constitutional sheriff? I've shown you that book, that small pamphlet book that was written by Mark Lamb that discussed the case that he won all the way up to the Supreme Court with regards to where the sheriff sits in the Constitution and where the sheriff resides in terms of being the one of, I'm not going to say the, but one of the only recognized law enforcement agencies, constitutionally speaking. So you think, city police, town police, those police agencies, they're not elected officers. Okay. And because they're not elected to their positions and have no essential responsibility to the people, they are not considered to be constitutional law enforcement agencies. Same thing with things like the FBI, as an example. Okay. The only law enforcement that is constitutionally recognized and recognizable all the way back to what is known as the Shire Reeve, which was a representative in monarchies in England in particular, but as monarchies, as being the representative of the monarchy in any given area, was changed, the name changed into sheriff. So the Shire Reeves of old in Old English and English common law are recognized as sheriffs, county sheriffs, here in the United States. Well, those local county sheriffs, and I said again, these next 4 years, I'm telling you, at least the next 2, there's going to be a huge, my prediction, a huge education in the way that our constitutional government actually works in this country. Well, you know how all of the cities like Los Angeles and the city police and so on and so forth, they're all saying, we're sanctuary cities, we're sanctuary states, whatever. Well, there's a report out now that local sheriffs actually back Trump's deportation plan. This in Breitbart, where they say, quote, people are tired of this. Local sheriffs expressed support for President-elect Donald Trump's plan to deport large numbers of illegal aliens from the United States, stating that people are tired of this. Chuck Jenkins, who is a Republican sheriff in Frederick County, Maryland is a blue state, and Richard Jones, a Republican sheriff in Butler County, Ohio, told the Wall Street Journal that they support Trump's deportation plan and are willing to assist ICE and its agents. Trump has stated that he plans to carry out the largest deportation effort in the history of the United States once he is in office. Carolyn Leavitt, who was selected to serve as Trump's White House press secretary, has confirmed that Trump will begin operations to deport millions of undocumented immigrants, illegal aliens, at the start of his term. Jenkins explained to the Wall Street Journal that he was willing to support Trump 100%, adding that he wants to do more within the law. When asked if he supports Trump's plan to carry out mass deportations once his term as president begins, Jones explained that he does, and so do the American people. People are tired of this. You're going to see a huge... Oh, this is, like I said, folks, this is going to be, and don't think that Florida isn't going to help. I mean, seriously, those sheriffs down in Florida, they're no joke. And honestly, I'm going to tell you, there's going to be a lot of county sheriffs, I think, across the country that are probably jump on board with something like this. We are going to see over the course of the next couple of years a master class in law enforcement, in Constitution 101, and how our federalist system of government is supposed to work. Okay? This is what's going to happen here. It's just, it was bound to happen, and the only way, honestly, to get us back on track as a republic is to go back to the Constitution, reread it, re-understand it, and bring the federal government down to essentially where it is back within its constitutional boundaries. That's the point. That's where we need to be. And I think over the course of the next 2 years, we are going to see this master class show up across the board with regards to these kinds of things. And the left is going to just melt down all over again with regards to it. Well, speaking of the left melting down, and I've talked about this a lot this week, but I'm going to continue and kind of finish this off, hopefully. I mean, I'm sure we're going to hear more about it. But the whole idea of the Trump tariffs, the left seems to believe, and is under, not a 100% mistaken belief in this, but the left seems to believe that the Trump tariffs, that when he announces these tariffs, that number one, they're automatically going to go into play, and number two, that they are going to be nothing but detrimental to the United States. And as I've explained on this program on a multitude of instances, the Trump tariffs are not necessarily always implemented, that tariffs themselves have been used effectively throughout time for decades. And in fact, Biden himself still has a Trump-era tariff put in place and even bumped it up in terms of the amount that was being generated by these tariffs. Well, recently, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, he posted about putting a 25% tariff on both Canada and Mexico and a 10% tariff on China. In particular, should Canada and Mexico not assist the United States with blocking the flow of not only illegal immigrants or illegal aliens through their countries, but also to prevent them, of course, from getting to the U.S. border, but also the fentanyl drug, okay? And other drugs, by the way, but fentanyl was the one that was called out. Well, here's the thing. Once he did that, the left is like, oh my gosh, our avocados are going to go up. And, you know, all kinds of stuff are going to go up. I mean, not understanding the fact that Mexico actually imports more of the U.S. products than what the U.S. does reciprocating from Mexico. But they also celebrated the fact that the Mexican president, you know, stood in front of cameras and was talking about how she was going to enact a tit-for-tat tariff on some of the things that were going on. Well, what ended up happening is a couple days later, she ended up basically saying, yeah, the caravans, we're stopping them. You know, we're not going to close our southern border. But what we are going to do is we're going to keep the caravans in Mexico, essentially on her own, reenacting the Remain in Mexico policy of the United States government as far as that. Now, what I haven't really covered because of the fact, and I did mention a little bit about this, but what I haven't really covered was what Canada is going to do. Canada and Trudeau, Justin Trudeau, he, on the announcement, immediately called a special session of his government for them to talk about it, and he planned to fly to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump. That happened today. And here in the Epoch Times, we can take a look at what was the result. So both Trump and Trudeau point out that they are optimistic after the meeting on tariffs. Now, the border and the fentanyl, by the way. Now, keep in mind, Canada's had a couple ministers, and I'm sorry, I can't remember their names right off the top of my head, but had a couple ministers who immediately posted, yeah, we're definitely going to help out, and we're going to try and stop this for you guys. But it wasn't quite official yet from Trudeau. Well, they discussed trade, border security, and the drug crisis during their Mar-a-Lago meeting. And Donald Trump said that he had a very productive meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Florida yesterday, emphasizing a need for the United States and Canada to work together to address concerns such as the border security, drug crisis, trade imbalances. Okay. Trudeau described the discussions as excellent and earlier stressed the need for dialogue to resolve issues of concern with the incoming administration. The November 29th meeting at the Mar-a-Lago estate marked an early test of the relationship between the president-elect and one of America's closest allies. As tensions rose over Trump's threat to impose a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada unless the country does more to stop the flow and illegal aliens across the border into the United States. So again, Trump has done this. I'm telling you folks, Trump has done this. He did this all throughout his first term. Okay. He did this all throughout his first term. He uses tariffs, the threat of tariffs, to bring the people to the table. He uses it as leverage to try and gain a foothold into into some other policy factors within these other countries. He has a policy that he wants to enact. He wants to help block the flow, in this case, of illegals and drugs crossing our border. Well, we only have Mexico to our south and Canada to our north. So what does he have to do? He has to use some sort of leverage to get these two to actually do what he's looking for. And he has done that. They have talked about it, and so on and so forth. He did not implement them. Now, if Mexico had not backed down, if Trudeau had not been more, assertive, which we know that's kind of difficult for Trudeau, but had been more assertive, then Trump probably would have on day one gone in and enacted his tariffs. But keep in mind, we are less than 60 days from the transfer of power. So he still has that stick in his pocket that he can use in order to influence foreign policy on these other countries. Okay? He's not afraid to use it. Here we go. So on the Canadian side, the Minister of Public Safety, Dominic LeBlanc, as well as Trudeau's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, and Deputy Chief of Staff, Brian Clow, were in attendance for this. So the dinner was at Trump's estate, which reportedly lasted for 3 hours, and brought together those senior Canadian officials and also Trump nominees for several key posts in the incoming administration. So Interior North Dakota Governor, the nominee for the Secretary of the Interior, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, his wife, Commerce Secretary nominee Howard Lutnick and his wife, along with National Security Advisor nominee Representative Mike Walls from Florida and his wife, and Senator-elect Dave McCormick and his wife were also in attendance. So, again, folks, this is, all this is, most of the time, all this really is just leverage. Whether or not he actually does it or not, it remains to be seen. But it's not something for us to get all uptight and scared over just because he mentions the word tariff. Okay? It's not something to get overly excited about. It is a tool that is used in Trump's arsenal to bring these people to the table so that he can converse with them and demonstrate that he is in a bargaining position of power. That's what he typically has used tariffs for. And it appears he will continue to use those tariffs and that kind of stuff again throughout his second term. So it's nothing to be worried about, nothing to be concerned about. The left is just gnashing their teeth and freaking out over literally nothing. Okay, last thing before I move on, there's some new data out with regards to the migrations. All right, the migrations of people within America, and it appears that there's new data that is showing that Americans are actually migrating into the southern states, and it's not because of the weather. It's because of jobs. It's because of cheaper, again, lower taxes, definitely more job opportunities, things like that. The top states are Florida, which gained, according to the National Association of Realtors, gained 372,870 in a net migration. Texas has gained 301 people in net migration. North Carolina has gained 126,712 in net migration. South Carolina itself picked up 91,853 people. And Georgia rounds out the top five with pulling down 88,325 net migrations. So Tennessee follows on at number 6 with more than 76,000 net migrations. Arizona, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Ohio round out the top 10 for it. And Ohio was the only state that was north of the Mason-Dixon line to land on that list. Now, according to the Census Bureau, the South, which is the nation's most populous region, is the only region to have maintained population growth throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And the growth is largely attributed to migration, with 706,266 people added via net domestic migration. California, which is the nation's most populous state, was the biggest loser of 2023, with the state shedding over 75,000 people. And this is exactly why those census issues that I talked about earlier this week are a real important part of the entire situation when it comes to things like electoral votes, as well as congressional seats and other apportionment items constitutionally. All right, folks, that is it for me for this evening. As I said, no question of the week because I didn't get one submitted, but if you do want to submit your question of the week, do so by sending it to fans, F-A-N-S, at AmericanPerspective.online. We will see you Monday night, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Don't forget, if you haven't already, head on over to rumble.com, get yourself an account. It's free. And once you are signed up on that account, find the American Perspective channel and make sure that you hit that green follow button in order to be notified whenever I go live. Also, too, on your way out, hit those thumbs up buttons, those like buttons across all my platforms, whether it was Facebook, X, YouTube, or Rumble. And I apologize for the technical difficulty that we had a little bit earlier that cut off the live stream. Like I said, we will see you Monday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we will see you on Monday. Good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.